Hi, I'm George. You're meeting with me, as you can see. Before I start, I would like to thank Tiasa for the invitation and all the people there at the festival that they made this possible, despite all the difficulties posed because of the COVID pandemic. I'm here to discuss in the context of the festival, and I'll try to take up some of the challenging topics that the brief outlined, and especially I'm interested in this reference to the recursivity between algorithmic and natural processes. So my talk will be entitled Geography and Geography, some notes on the normative disposition of analytical geomodels. So basically, what I'm interested in this talk is this latent character that some of the analytical models we create may have, which makes them more prescriptive, more normative than they're designed to be. Let me start with some notes on the interconnection between modeling and sensing, and I hope that also the title of the talk will become more clear. So I'll be dragging myself all along. Great. That's it. So modeling to make sense. Bringing together some foundational moments of geography and biosemiotics, sensing emerges as the main device of animals, including humans, to construct the perception of their environment. Through this signaling, organisms define not only their world, but also their very selves, reshaping to integrate and adapt in this environment of theirs. Humans actually embody this theory through the evolution of our physiological features, continuously seeking to extend our sensory apparatus by, for example, utilizing the specialized sensing of other animals, or inventing tools as prosthetics to our bodily sensing mechanisms. Scaling this up, reaching out to understand the environment and parts of the world, demands the strenuous labor of empirical information collection and assemblage, which has taken the form of genealogical indexes, herbariums, cartographical surveying, but also later atmospheric, soil and water measurements, etc. The gradual assemblage of sensing tools, from analog to electronic, with their increasing scale, ubiquity and interconnectivity, has eventually extended humanity's sensing apparatus to become a planetary scheme enveloping the Earth. Although field research and physical surveying are still present, a good deal of sensing now happens remotely, albeit with a no less arduous effort. So some of those who would once roam unexplored territories to map their contours now cross-reference the geospatial data as gathered by satellites and stored in point cloud datasets. Nevertheless, sensing in itself generates nothing more than arrays of numbers and bulk figures. After collecting them, those quote-unquote raw data need to be anthologized in certain ways, making connections and assuming correlations that would make the collection meaningful. Alexander von Humboldt, one of the fathers of modern geography, was the first to place plant species into their surrounding contexts: latitude, altitude, geology, climate, temperature, soil type, etc., to account for the specific patterns they express. So then, if von Humboldt, by assuming relations and theorizing them, was essentially making interpretative botanological models for the geography of plants and their environments, similar modeling procedures are required in order to taxonomize the outputs of our planetary scale sensing apparatus, and corresponding models are created through our planetary scale computation apparatus. Paul Edwards, in his book A Vast Machine, focusing on the epistemology of climate science, describes the necessity of models to even make sense of initial measurements, and in addition emphasizes the model's ability to complement primary data with newly generated ones, which are basically simulated. Moreover, the size of information sensed through the dense planetary electronic skin requires the brain power made possible by computers in order to be analyzed, pointing to this interconnection and interdependence of computation and planetary scale sensing. This is true not only of weather and climate phenomena, but of all other sciences studying Earth processes. Then, that said, planetary scale sensing and modeling are inextricably connected, for the first, sensing, becomes meaningful only through the second, only through modeling. Operating together, they create the analytical renderings of the Earth by which we live and through which we act back upon them. Geomodels that are more than they claim. Satellites could soon map every tree on Earth, according to a very recent report on Nature. But some would say, what's the gain? Some are wondering. Different yet complementary critiques coming from the humanities, the social, and even the natural sciences argue that our present condition appears to be overly consumed with accumulating environmental data. Undoubtedly, the effort to refine the resolution of the sensing image and to update the computational capability of the planetary skin and its central processing units solidifies our analytical models. While it remains a contested issue if that solidification equals a development of our understanding of the problem, so it remains a contested issue if the more computation, the more data we have, the better we understand the problem, it certainly makes the prevailing understandings more rigid and more difficult to challenge. In their hypertrophy, such analytical models many times conceal essential hypotheses that underlie their framework. Disclosed in their confidence levels and the dense data indexes lie assumptions defining the kind of information gathered or their axiomatic synthesis. Taking this under consideration, we want to argue that some of these models may operate on the fence between the analytical and the propositional, sometimes even making the leap from the former, from the analytical, towards the latter. Then this normative aspect of maps and models is being documented by various scholars. It's not a new thing. For example, a very well-known critique is the one targeting the most commonly used projection of the globe, the Mercator projection, exposing, among other, problems of scale or focus connected to misinterpretations, stereotypes, and colonial views. On another register, Paul Edwards examines situations when intermeshed and recursive models feed one another to generate data that are not a result of sensing real events, but rather modeled mirrors of them. Models, as he writes, are based on data generated by models, which are themselves calibrated through other models, etc., etc. Similarly, Jennifer Gabrys, in her book Program Earth, argues that the totality of our planetary sensing apparatus not only monitors but also generates new environments and environmental relations through the ones they sensed. But the normative leap that interests us is arguably even more consequentially exposed in those cases when the environmental reading is happening in the context and as the base of active interventions to follow, like in the case of climate change mitigation. Thus, here, we will address this leap from the descriptive or from the analytical to the normative, focusing on one typology of mitigation that has come to be called natural climate solutions. These are some proposals to utilize natural ecosystems to mitigate climate change and as a response to the ecological crisis. So we choose these because their epistemological construction insists that they are a set of solutions of minimum intervention, making it interesting and counterintuitive to investigate how their analytical and geographic models of natural ecosystems conceal normative, propositional aspects that end up writing on top of the very image, which they claim that they're only reading. So let us briefly unpack three versions of this normative, of what we understand as the normative leap. At first, for natural climate solutions, such a leap is perhaps especially apparent when, for example, maps recording biodiversity-rich areas are simultaneously becoming the blueprints, or at least the base for the blueprints for conservation, based on the implicit premise that the least or best we can do is save what we currently have. The Half-Earth Project, following biologist E.O. Wilson's book of the same name, indexes hotspots of biodiversity, but is unclear whether these places are mapped as taxonomies or are laid down as planetary conservation plans. So these images. So are they just analytical taxonomies or are they plans? Deterministic as they may be, they're also arbitrary and misleading, as these readings depend on a human-centered definition of what is natural for nature, or assuming self-fantasized and externally imposed futures. For example, the normative prescription that the tropics should remain green, even if it too means underdeveloped. A second point where the normative disposition becomes evident is in the process of choosing the data to be collected. And this is because the assembly of the analytical model is tied to a specific understanding of the problem and a specific hypothesis for its possible solution and overall solvability, of course. Regarding our running example, natural climate solutions are invented by the scientific community as a response to climate change, which is in turn understood as a problematic disequilibrium of planetary chemistry owing to an excess of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So, since climate change is understood as a chemistry problem or a biophysical, biochemical problem, then natural climate solutions are also conceptualized as biochemical and biophysical solutions. And their analytical and propositional models, utilizing natural climate solutions, focus on their carbon absorption capability. Telling of this rationale are the proposed parametric valuations for the assessment of ecosystems, like the so-called climate regulation value, which scores ecosystems solely according to their biophysical and biochemical carbon sinking performance. This techno-scientific framing of ecosystems as carbon sinks prevails and structures the relevant discourse, extending outside the scientific domain to latently influence the policy and even the activist realm. Regardless of the political premises of different policy groups or activist organizations, the sinking affordance of ecosystems is not only treated as a given, but as an implicit priority too. A third aspect, then, of this normative disposition becomes apparent after the selection of data, as they are processed to be configured in a coherent image. Since similar datasets can be assembled in different ways and point to different directions, this architecture is another implicit propositional aspect of the otherwise analytical models. Putting data together in certain ways highlights specific vulnerabilities of systems and ecosystems, creating treasure maps, quote-unquote treasure maps, for coming interventions. The upstream creation of the analytical maps that later shape any form of geographic engineering essentially assumes a specific planetarity, present and future. The varying geopolitical priorities, the cosmotechnical traits, and the geographic vernaculars result in varying totality projections and holistic models of the desirable world to come. Again, existing natural climate solutions interventions, like the upscale tree plantations, provide palpable examples of conflicting or incommensurable cosmograms. Let's see two of them. The Plant for the Planet NGO, which first set the billion trees target, coupled with the ETH Crowther Lab to map the global reforestation potential. What we see here is the map of this paper for the global reforestation potential, and the planting locations that are chosen according to this cosmogram for this NGO. On the other hand, Ecosia, a search engine of environmental cause, also plants trees, get based on the maps assembled by a consortium of scientists focusing on biodiversity hotspots rather than carbon concentration. The two planting trees projects both imagine a billion trees more to be accommodated in this planet, but propose and eventually create different afforested worlds. However, the engineering focus on chemistry filters out the specific assumptions and preferences upon which the holistic renderings of the intervention models are based. The different totalities are always there, but never made explicit, most times being non-conscious or considered of secondary importance. Medium design for models. In climate change mitigation paths, from the utilization of ecosystems to the employment of synthetic artifacts, the hermeneutics of the models precede the actions taken. As worlds unto themselves, the descriptive models have then already laid a framework that influences the procedure thereafter, actually predetermining genealogies of acceptable responses and acceptable solutions. Therefore, analytical models too partake in the ongoing re-engineering of worlds through a recursive translation between Earth and Earth models, indirectly defining more aspects of the discussion than initially designed to. If we refer to geography as the understanding of various features of the Earth through our interpretive modeling, be that terrestrial maps, plant taxonomies, or climate contours, then, in cases like the ones we showed, these models are not only reading, but implicitly rewriting the Earth, performing a literal geography, a geowriting, a geographing, the process of this rewriting. However, despite the crucial role that these models play, their framing, their imaginative interpretation, and creative synthesis, all of them lag behind the stiff technoscientific and seemingly pure analytical approach that is infused and dispersed in them. Therefore, it seems to be more design work on the premises and contexts of these models that we want to argue for. As Benjamin Bratton writes, part of the design question has to do with interpreting the status of the image of the world that is created by that sensing layer, as well as that mechanism's own image of itself, and the way that it governs the planet by governing its model of the planet. In parallel to, and not instead of, the useful effort to map every tree on the planetary surface, there seems to be also the necessity for another effort to research the co-production of climate change as both fact and problem, together with economics and social justice. In the articulation of data in meaningful renderings, acknowledging the holistic base upon which the imaginations are built is essential in learning from and acting to address the frictions that will be emerging in the juxtapositions of the different cosmograms. The complementary domain we're trying to outline points to everything around what seems to be the core problem that science and engineering come to tackle. It suggests to spend more time working on the framework of the problem, the conceptualization of its totality, and the foregrounding of its hidden components. As a design project, it essentially refers to the medium of the engineering problem. The extended planetary intervention praxis to which we wish to point will need to question all of the premises of the planetary scale sensing and processing computations, the need to synthesize different scales, consider different planetarities, and employ different computational datasets. Great, so the talking part is over. And to close, I would like to share with you a project that I was part of while at Strelka Institute in Moscow in 2019, which elaborates on just one of the possible aspects of this extended interventional praxis that I have discussed, and perhaps could work as a proof of concept. It looks at the varying cosmotechnics and imaginaries of planetarities that any geographical intervention is infused with. It attempts to address in this way one of the problems that I discussed previously, highlighting the implicit cosmograms underlying current georeadings for future geowritings. The project is entitled of Earth and Sky, and is developed in collaboration with Alexander Geysman, Olesia Kovalenko, and Anna-Luise Lorenz. It introduces the concept of geodesign vernacular, arguing for a place-specific imagination and conception of geographical interventions, highlighting the interconnection between the formation of the land and the construction of the nation. So enjoy, and thank you for following along.
Особенная архитектура. Географическая инженерия континентального масштаба. Геодизайн. Строитель. Теперь это амбициозный геолог. Креативный топограф, увлеченный чтением климатолог. Геосфера и атмосфера в равной степени становятся источниками материалов, камней, лесов и рек, но также облаков, взвешенных частиц и электромагнитных волн. Но на этой планетарной стройке методы не универсальны. Ощущения и искривления ландшафта становятся практиками строения нации, очерчивающими особые вернакуляры. Растянувшиеся на 11 часовых поясов искусственные рельефы России смастрены с особой логикой. Выходя за пределы антропогенных геометрий, исчерчивающих сушу, русский геодизайн смотрит ввысь, осознавая потенциал атмосферных потоков. Не только терраформинг, но также эфироформинг. В масштабе этой страны геодизайн пересекает границы и преодолевает различия между государственными землями и глобальностью территорий. В амбициозности порыва не просто отличить науку от вымысла. Воображение становится фирменным секретом, необходимым для воплощения. Книги «Грезы о земле и небе» родоначальник космонавтики Константин Циолковский косвенно работал над основаниями грандиозного проекта земных преобразований. В названии и между строк его космических путешествий заключена суть российского вернакуляра геодизайна. Во взаимодействии между землей и небом, объединенных наукой и вымыслом.